Hello, everybody.
Hi, everyone.
There's a link to the agenda if you don't have it. And we're at 6:02, and I think we've got most folks here. But maybe just, I saw you a second ago, Chris, but there, okay, good, you're there still, thank you.
Yeah, I'm here. I apologize. I have a couple bites of dinner left, so I'm going to go off camera for just a moment.
Totally fair.
No problem.
Yeah. So I guess it's 6 o'clock. We can call the meeting to order. And I guess the first step is roll call. Michelle, if you're there and able to do that.
Chair Knaddison.
Here.
Member Lewis.
Here.
Member Sardinal. Member Diedrich. Member Whitney.
Present.
And Member Heller. All right, you have a quorum.
Alrighty, thank you. So the first item on the agenda is recognition of public comment. I guess that we don't have anybody here with public comment currently. And so up next is review and approval of the minutes. Is there a motion to approve the minutes?
Motion to approve.
I second that.
Okay, thank you. Any discussion or any amendments that need to be made? If not, we can go to vote.
Chair Knaddison.
Aye.
Member Lewis.
Aye.
Member Diedrich.
Aye.
And Member Whitney.
Aye.
All right, motion carries.
Alrighty, thank you. And up next is new business with the CIP, I think Capital Improvement Program, Project Committee, Project Prioritization Committee process. And I'm hopeful that there's somebody from the city staff who can help facilitate this part of the conversation.
Yeah, I've got the list here called up there, and I've kind of put the transportation projects all together to kind of, so you can see all the transportation ones as well as all the others, and decide how you want to prioritize. And I've got the directors' ratings as well for you to reference there, so you can kind of see what the directors and the other evaluation committee prioritize, and consider that as you prioritize it as a committee. If you're ready, I can try to share my screen here, and we can kind of go through the projects and get your thoughts on how you would like to prioritize them.
That'd be great, thank you.
See if I can get this called up here. All right, is that working?
Yep, we're seeing a spreadsheet and a bright orange section.
Yeah, so the orange section is the the top priority transportation ones that the directors had. So they're listed by highest to lowest ranking as the directors rank them. So it gives you an idea of what they focused on, the things that were priorities. And then the yellow is the stuff that the staff committee prioritized. Those three there are the three that the staff felt were the most highest priority for transportation anyway. So I guess the thought is we can I can kind of go through each project a little bit, I guess, and explain to you what it's about, and then you can discuss after that what you have any other thoughts or want to hear about any other ones you might want to move up the list to prioritize.
Sure.
So if that sounds good, I'll just kind of go through the list as it's presented here. The Union Avenue Bridge rehabilitation. So that's the one that was funded $400,000 for this year for the design of the replacement of the bridge deck on that bridge. That bridge deck is in kind of marginal shape right now. We've got maybe a year or so left on it before we're going to really have some major repairs to do. So we've in the process of getting a design consultant lined up this year to get the design done, and then the funding request for next year would be to actually construct the new bridge deck for that bridge. So that's the bridge over the Platte River there west of Santa Fe on Union Avenue. That's that bridge, one that gets all the concrete trucks and trash trucks and everything driving on it all day, and it's definitely starting to take its toll. So that's why that one is on the list there. That's a bridge that's rated not optimal. We definitely something we need to consider there for the future. And the East Dartmouth traffic calming, that's one I think you're familiar with. That's the mini roundabouts on Dartmouth there. So what we have on that one is the cost for the construction has come in a little higher than we expected. So we were able to go back to CDOT and ask for more grant funding, and they were willing to give us another $800,000 if we would fund another $200,000. So that's what that is for. The 200 ask is for the city share of that extra 800,000 we get from CDOT. So that's another priority there to get that grant funding there to make sure we can construct those roundabouts to the right standards. And then the Union Avenue repaving, that kind of ties in with the bridge rehab. That's between Santa Fe and the bridge there at Platte River. That street is really starting to deteriorate quite a bit on us. We've seen a lot of potholes and a lot of repairs needed on that. We need to reconstruct at this point. Basically, it's deteriorated to the point where its useful life is kind of used up at this point. And we need to reconstruct it basically. So that's what that funding would be for. I think the dollar amount there is, make sure here I quote it right. It's 1.5 million is the ask on that one. So I did in the right column over here, I did total up these top priorities to kind of give you a sense of how much all these would be if you choose to go with these priorities here. So it's about 6.6 for all these top ones here. But I'll go through the rest of these. The concrete utility city share, that's our standard one each year that we pay for the city share of the concrete utility for all the properties that the city owns along curb, gutter, and sidewalks. That's kind of a standard annually funded project there. And then the road and bridge, that is, we're going to change the title of that. That's for the materials we use to maintain the roads for our in-house street crew, for all the road base and asphalt and rock and all the stabilization material we need. That's another annual one, and that's I think a $300,000 a year is what we're asking on that one. Is I guess $350 now we've got on that, but that's to buy the materials for our crew to be able to repair the roads and keep the potholes, patch all the potholes and things, buy all the asphalt we need for that. So that's what that funding is used for. And then this next one, the pavement maintenance by area, that's our resurfacing project there. That's the money we use for the repaving and the slurry seal and the crack seal and the surface improvements that we contract out. That's the funding for that. Alley maintenance, that's the funding we use to maintain the V channels in the alleys there to make sure those stay in good shape and they drain properly. So we request a little bit more money each year on that just to maintain them. We've been through every alley in the city at this point. We've got the V channel on all of them, but we still have maintenance needs that some of them don't hold up quite as well. And we need to do a little more surface improvements and things to make sure that they stay in good shape so they drain properly and we don't have potholes and things develop. From the Oxford Avenue pedestrian bridge match. So that's another familiar project I'm sure you've seen before, but that is the reason that's a request this year is we've got the development there at the corner of Navajo and Oxford there, the Sam's Auto development. So that developer has agreed to contribute $600,000 to the cost of this project if it's approved. And so the ask on that is that project is about 1.1 million short of the funding we need to build it at this point. So the ask on that one's $500,000 to match that 600 from the developer to get that 1.1 we need to actually construct that project. So that's why that's coming up as additional funding for that one there. That would get us to the amount we need to actually construct that project. So that one does hinge on that development being approved and there's a referendum now, I think, on that development, that it's going to be a little while before we know for sure if that's still going to go through or not. But that is, in the event that it does, the developer is contributing a pretty good chunk there to help us get that constructed there. And the reason the developer is contributing is because they are directly benefiting from that bridge. That development is right next to the light rail station, and the people who live there are definitely going to benefit from that bridge. So that's where the developer's contribution came into play on that one, that they are truly benefiting from that. And that's something we asked for the impact fee on that one. So, and the concrete program accessible ramps, that's the ADA ramps that we replace every year. We try to do about 100 of those a year, and that's what that funding is for. It's kind of an annual one we've seen before, I'm sure. And then the bridge repairs, that is one that we've got every 2 years. We get a bridge inspection report for all the bridges in the city. We've got about 25 bridges, and that funding goes towards making some of those recommended repairs. A lot of the repairs in the reports are not critical, urgent items. The Union Avenue Bridge is the only one that does have a critical need, but the others it's not quite as urgent. There's certainly some maintenance things we can do to make the bridges last longer, and that's funding that we use for that, to do some of those little repairs, things on the bridges that are needed to help extend the life. So those are the top ones there. I guess I can keep going through all these if you want. A lot of them are self-explanatory. If you have any questions on those or any others, I can explain them to you, or if you want to talk about these top ones, or if any others have caught your eye that you maybe want to talk about and move up the list there to recommend for funding next year, we can certainly share more information on those. I'll let you kind of respond to what you want to hear about or what you'd like to talk more about.
Yeah, thanks for that. Thanks for that description of those projects. I had a question. Most of these seem either familiar projects that we've seen presentations on before, or they seem like things, like you say, that are self-explanatory. Like you have to buy materials or something. That makes sense. I wonder about just want to confirm the Oxford Avenue pedestrian bridge that would connect from the south side of Oxford over where where Oxford goes underneath the rail line, so that like people in apartments and the housing on the south side of Oxford can get over to the light rail. Is that the goal there?
That's correct. So yeah, the Oxford Station apartment building that's already there, and then the one to the south of it is just getting built. The one across the way is also a similar situation. All the people who live there would be able to cross over Oxford, and that also helps us with the signal timing there. We don't have to have as long of a signal cycle for the pedestrians to cross. They can use the bridge and not have to push the button, and then we delay all of the cars getting through there, and that creates some problems at times. So that's another benefit of that, is we kind of clear that pedestrian cycle from the signal there, and then people can use the bridge to get across there and kind of help with a little bit of the congestion in that area.
Got it. That makes sense. Yeah. Any other questions on some of these projects that we've just heard about?
I don't have a question on the projects as much as I do the kind of the total cost versus like the actual possibilities. So, there's 6.6 in these 10, I believe. What are they looking for? Like, if we had to order them and there's 5 million, like how to get creative with 5 million, or is it, there's a $1 million budget and this is a wish list?
So from my understanding, I think there's about 5 million for sure that we have available next year. Then it's going to come down to how much we got in permit fees and stuff this year, the one-time funding. So it's 5 million minimum, and then it could be maybe up to maybe like 6 or 7 million, I think, would be the maximum. So that's kind of why we're looking for that 5 to 7 million range, I think. So that's probably as much funding as we would have to allocate for next year. So that puts us right in that ballpark, but we certainly can add more to the list there to move them up or down or something to adjust that number if you feel more comfortable with others being a higher priority for transportation related needs anyway.
Okay, awesome. I was just really curious about what we were working with versus kind of like if everything under the sun is available, the list might look a little different. No, this is great.
Like 8 million, but, sorry.
Yeah. Go ahead.
I was just saying, last year I think we had around 8 million. It was a pretty good year last year, but I think this year, from what I understand, is a little bit less. So it'll be, I would say, probably no more than 7, just from what I know. But I can't confirm that for sure. But that's probably probably any more than that would not be available.
Okay. As far as the one time, or like the developer, let's say for the Oxford Ave or the grant for the East Dartmouth traffic calming, are those kind of things that could get rolled over into 2025? Or is that a type of thing where it's like we should take advantage of it while the money's on the table versus like, well, if we roll it over, we can't guarantee, obviously, like the developer wanting to pony up $600,000 is a lot different, but the CDOT grant, would that be able to roll over into another year? Or is that something that would have to be used in 2024?
Yeah, so if we rolled that over into 25, we would risk losing that grant funding because CDOT does want us to get that funding spent in 24. So that would be something and that funding is pretty much guaranteed on the CDOT side of things for the East Dartmouth project there. They have, we've got a commitment from CDOT to provide that funding if we can get 200,000 to match it with. So that'd be there isn't really a risk there as far as the money will come in if we can match the 200 to finish that project off. But I know that if we put it off another year, that it could risk the funding there because I know CDOT's looking to get their safety money spent there next year.
Okay, wonderful. That's good to know as far as priority. Appreciate it.
Yeah, go ahead, Member Dietrich.
Thank you. Let me put my hand down. Tim, thanks for supporting us on this. It looks like what we have, we've got this memo to City Council from, it looks like a committee that you were on that was kind of working through this. Is that right?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, I was on the employee committee there to kind of prioritize things.
Okay. So I'm looking at your list here, and we've kind of talked about the orange and yellow items. I'm kind of curious about what else is below. If you could scroll down a little bit more, just kind of interested if there were some other things on the table that maybe this committee might be interested in looking at. Like for example, I've did see a little preview there. It says walk and wheel implementation. There's some carry forward budget. It looks like it hasn't been spent. I don't know how much more is needed for some of that, or if that was more that was going to be requested. Looked like this year 250. If there was like a portion of that maybe we could put towards that to keep doing more of some of those items. Or I guess I have a. We won't keep everybody all night, and I know you guys spent a ton of time on the prioritization here, so I won't get too deep into some of these. But just for instance, if there was something we could do with that walk and wheel that might be able to allocate a little bit more, that might get like a little bit bigger budget to complete something that the community would see. I think about like the Oxford bike pass, or not Oxford, sorry, Dartmouth bike pass, was very well received by the community, but it took a little while to get there. We had to get the funds for it, and your typical process that just takes a while sometimes. So walk and wheel, I would love to see that kind of keep moving forward on here. I just for my input, things that we get matching for, just generally sort of in favor. I think that gives us a lot of mileage for our dollar on things. So if there are other opportunities we have for matching, whether it's grants or something like this developer matching for the bridge, I mean that just makes sense to me to double our money or whatever the case might be with those matches. So definitely favor those types of things. The Oxford Bridge in particular, it's been a while since we've talked about it. I know you mentioned there was that other potential development that could be going in. I'm not sure if a similar situation like we had with the current development that's there, if we'd be able to get some additional matching funds, something like that from that other developer. But if something like that is available, I would love to see any budget that the city could put in be more towards like beautification or making it look better, or some aesthetics or something, because that is a cool opportunity we have for a neat pedestrian feature that's visible to a lot of people coming to the community, as well as usefulness, of course. Thank you for scrolling down a little bit. I'm going to look at the screen, and if anybody else has comments, feel free to chime in.
Yeah, thanks for those thoughts. I certainly agree about, with your comments, and Member Whitney with your thoughts about pursuing projects that have matching money to them, the Dartmouth Traffic Circle and the Oxford Bridge, that certainly seems like a wise thing to do. Those are worthwhile projects that we've been talking about regardless. And so if we can find extra creative ways, helpful ways, more efficient ways to get them funded, that feels like it's being a good steward of tax dollars. And then, yeah, I had that maybe Tim, if you could explain a little bit more about what happened with the walk and wheel money from this year. Does that just roll over and it's available for next year?
That's correct. Yeah, this year's, I think, what is it, 138 or something? I think we've got in there still. And that will carry over to the following year. So the biggest thing we used the walk and wheel on money this year was to match the grant for South Broadway between Bellevue and 285. We're going to put the bike lanes on Sherman there and do the neighborhood bikeway, we're calling it there, where it's going to try to encourage people to use Sherman, to use their bikes going north and south to parallel Broadway, and then cut over at the bus stops if they need to use the bus or whatever. So we're trying to, it's a big part of the walk and wheel implementation next year is going to be that Sherman piece. So we definitely are working towards implementing a lot of the things in the walk and wheel plan. And that's kind of why we haven't prioritized that quite as much for 24, but certainly for 25, that's something I think we want to try to, start implementing that master plan and putting money towards being able to install some of those improvements. We've gotten developers to do a little bit of it over off of at the old Elks Lodge over there. That developer's got those 3 parcels over there, and he's going to be doing quite a few bike lanes over there in that area of town. So we are getting it implemented without having to spend city money on it, which is kind of nice. We're able to get developers to contribute to some of that. So we do have some, between the grant on Broadway and then the developer contributions, we are getting some of that done. Is why we didn't really prioritize city funding quite as much, because we are getting quite a bit of implementation going with other sources of funds and other contributions from developers and things.
Got it. Thank you.
Questions on any projects or anything I can explain or anything? Some of these are kind of tier 3 things, are more 4 to 5 years out, kind of just future things we need to be thinking about. I think that's why we didn't prioritize them for this year. We know they're probably bigger than we can fund this year. It's not as high of a priority as far as needs in the city, but they certainly are things we want to keep on the radar for future consideration. They are going to be eventually things that are going to need to be figured out, like the walk and wheel, or the rail trail. Once if we get that Oxford Ped Bridge in, we want to obviously try to finish the rail trail to be able to fully utilize that bridge and get a bridge over 285, and then be able to go north-south all the way through the city on the rail trail there. So that's future considerations as things develop there. We will keep those on the radar, that would be things we need to fund eventually to complete that trail network.
Greg, do you mind if I ask a question of Tim?
Yeah, please go ahead.
I couldn't figure out how to raise my hand on this thing anymore. So anyway, so the question, Tim, I have for you, I know that if we open up the, what document is it? That very first attachment within the notes, it shows us all the different items based on the scorecard, right? So how all the directors scored these based on, several factors. The interesting thing that I noticed is some of the reasoning that you just provided in terms of the walk and wheel plan, that's not contained within the document. I'm kind of curious, is it possible to add that in the future on why something was prioritized, less likely for this year, or less of a priority for this year versus, some of the other projects? I think that type of context would be helpful, not only for these committees, but also for me to kind of understand, well, why isn't that we're not looking at walk and wheel for this year? You obviously provided a great answer that it's going to be in future years that we're going to be picking it up. So just kind of curious if that's something that we can add, or yeah, I guess that's mostly a comment, but could be a question as well.
I think that's a really good point. I think you're right, because there is a certain reason why we recommend things the way we do. We have things are getting done a different way, and that is something we didn't really put in that criteria. I don't think, because maybe there's another source or another initiative already started on that is already because you're right, that's a good way for context to understand what's, what's already happening, and maybe we don't need to spend as much city money this year because we've already got other sources, but that's.
Right.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of how we could, that criteria there would be good. I think there's a criteria for is outside funding available, but that doesn't really speak to the, not just funding available, it's other people are doing it for us. Developers are actually building it for us, so it's not necessarily, we don't need to fund it because it's funded by private development money. So that is a good point. I can pass that on to Tim Dodd as well to think about how we can maybe, as council sees this and stuff, you can understand some of why it's a priority, but we're not recommending funding because we've got another
Right.
source.
Yeah. Okay. And for members of the committee, I had to basically search by that blue column on the column F, that PIP 25, PIP 30, whatever it happens to be. You could just search for it within that initial attachment. It kind of gives you a little bit of breakdown, but not the context. So.
Yeah, it is more number rated rather than any kind of language. I think that's true. It maybe needs a little bit more of a descriptor for each one to understand the context or the, like you said, the history of it or whatever, why we recommend what we do, because it is there's certainly a reason why each one's just like the Union Avenue Bridge there. You need the context of this bridge is failing, and it's not just a random request. This is information that we have that is important to know about that affects the integrity of the bridge. So.
Yeah, Member Whitney, go ahead.
Thank you. So I did have a question, kind of just about the general purpose of the CIP in general, like looking at the CIP as part of the budget. Now, there's obviously standard operating expenses that would go into road maintenance, bridge maintenance, everything like that that you covered. Is that, and you've mentioned them here as part of this, is that, so that is contained within the CIP, or like standard operating is outside of the CIP? So like buying materials, are those materials that would be for capital improvement projects, or are those materials for standard like potholes?
So it's an interesting question. I've asked that question myself, actually. I'm trying to understand the difference there, but as far as road maintenance, it really comes down to whether it's done by the city crew or a contractor. It's still investing in our roadway network to make sure it stays strong and functional for a long time. So whether it's having a contractor come in and repave or having the city crew come in and repave, we still need to do it one way or the other. So the way it's been broken down is to kind of give you a little easier context. So this is the amount of materials that the city purchases and installs on the roadway network, and then the other part is how much contractor work is being done. I think is why that was split off that way, is to kind of show the city crews work and then the contractor work that's done for maintaining the road network.
Okay, cool. That just, it's helpful to understand kind of how that factors into this budgeting versus obviously the operations budget of the, parks or the maintenance department, basically trying to just grasp helping with priority, because obviously if like, well, we have to maintain our roadways would be like always top priority in my mind, and everything else would fall below that. But then also that seems like something that would go into just the operational budget of the department. So I wanted to make sure I'm kind of like parsing those correctly when looking at the priorities. But I'm sure you guys have also factored that in. So thank you.
Yeah, so the another way to think about it is the like the sand and salt we use in the wintertime, the ice melt material, that does come out of the operating budget because that's more of a maintenance thing that goes away. The pothole patching and stuff is a permanent repair that stays there forever. So it is actually a reconstruct or rebuild of that part of the road. But the sand, salt and things like that, those are operating because they're more for maintenance to make sure the road stays ice free and that kind of thing. So those do come out of the operating budget, but the actual materials to repair the roads are a capital improvement into the roadway itself and improve the condition of the road.
And can you explain what sideway gap construction is? Or sidewalk gap, line 60?
Sure, so that is, we have a listing now of all the sidewalk gaps in the city. I'm trying to think of how many miles or feet there is. There's quite a bit. So what that funding is for is to start doing segments of missing sidewalk each year to start closing some of those gaps and be able to have sidewalks that connect and don't end in a dirt path or something like that. So we do have, we actually have a couple of projects going on that right now. We're going to be doing, once again, on Union Avenue between Santa Fe and the Platte River on the north side there, we're going to finish that sidewalk off with the funding we've got. We got the ARPA funding there that's $250,000 that's planned for that. And then we've also got a little piece on ECA just south of Dartmouth there, just north of the Civic Center on the west side that we're going to connect that. So there's a priority list of sidewalk gaps in the city that need to be connected someday. And that's what that funding would be used for, is to start closing some of those gaps in the city sidewalk network.
I had a question about, let's see, it's PIF 40, the reconstruction of East Paseo. What is that?
That one has been on there a little while. I think what that is the on the 3400 block of Broadway there, we've got the crosswalk there that's I guess it's called the Paseo crosswalk. It's the gap between the buildings on Broadway there. That's the Paseo. So that would be the reconstruct of that area, and I think adding some tables and benches and things like that, just make it a little more inviting to the public in that area. And some lighting, I think, too, was part of what that was for. So that is what that project's intended to do, is just make that area a little more friendlier to the public.
Got it. Okay, thank you. And I was looking for I think it's called like Complete Streets on Hamden. And wasn't sure if that's listed in here or not.
So that will not be listed on here because it's already funded. We funded that last year with the grant match. So I think it was, I can't remember the grant match we had to do, but that was part of last year's CIP budget that was already funded. So at this point, we don't anticipate needing any more money for that project to be able to build it. So it is, that's a good, I wondered if anybody would pick up on that, but those are not on here for a reason because we already funded them. So
Okay.
Everything goes
That's
according
great.
to plan. We shouldn't have to put any more money towards that project, and we'll be done. Same with the South Broadway Complete Streets. The city share that we put into that should be enough to cover that entire project. We don't need to allocate any more funding to either one of those.
Got it. Okay.
I want to say we put $1.5 million towards it, and it was like what, 7.2 million, 7.4 million grant from CDOT, Dr. Cog.
Yeah, that's great. What else? Any other questions or comments?
I do have one other question, I guess. What do you guys need from us particularly? Like in the more absolute terms, is it a sign off on the ordering? Is it our recommendations to bring in items, et cetera? I guess, what have other committees done? And how can we help you?
I think it's a recommendation to City Council as far as the priorities of where to spend the money next year. But based on all these projects and different priorities, there's obviously a lot of competing priorities here. They're not all transportation projects. There's other things that are competing for the same funding. And that for the Transportation Committee, I think is what are the transportation priorities that you would see that we would want to fund and are important to fund next year and in future years, just so we have a good handle on what you feel are things that should be considered first. So the citywide transportation plan is one I just noticed on there too. That is something we've been trying to get to for a while now. That would be basically a master plan for the transportation network in the city to make sure all of our roads have the right capacity. And if we do get developers come in and going to add traffic to a road, we have a plan for, this road needs to be widened, or we need to add a lane or a turn lane here. Just have a plan like that to show where we think the increased traffic is going to create bottlenecks that we might want to as developers come in, we can get them to help with some of those costs there. So that is something we've had it on the list for a while there, but that may be something for the transportation committee to prioritize and say that is something that needs to be considered sooner than later, just to have a plan for future growth in the city and make sure that we're not missing out on opportunities from developments to help with some of the roadway network improvements we may need to require from them.
Is there a rough cost to that?
Yeah, I think it's 250,000. Let me scroll over here and make sure.
Oh yeah, 250. Okay, I see it in the sheet.
So that's just basically having a consultant do a master plan for the whole city of, the traffic volumes and flow, and make sure we have a good idea of what future needs may be. So I guess the thought on prioritizing too is, knowing that we have a certain amount of funding there, what would you use it on? What would you use the first 5 to 7 million on? Basically, is the recommendation I think to have for city council to consider. Your thoughts on transportation priorities in the city and what we think are needed more urgently than others. So yeah, these top ones, no under 6.6, we'd probably look at, are some of these maybe you drop down the list to maybe replace them with some of these other ones that are not on the priority list right now. I mean, these are just director and staff recommendation things, but we certainly, if you see some other ones that stand out to you as things that transportation wise need to be done sooner than later, that's certainly some feedback I think would be important to include with the decision that finally gets made. Thoughts on moving any up or down the list or anything, maybe of ones that you might want to reprioritize, or I think the walk and wheel is a good one. I agree that's for transportation purposes. That's something we want to keep on the radar there, because that is a plan that we have, and if we don't fund it there, we'll never be able to implement. But it is, like I explained, that's kind of why we had it down the list this year, because we are able to implement it without having to spend city money for at least next year anyway. But certainly things like that, if you want to move those up, we can certainly, it's up to the committee to decide which ones you think are the highest priority for next year.
I'll say that I really do like the idea of being able to use the grants, get the grants, and put up, if it's 4-to-1 money, it seems like for that East Dartmouth, that seems like a no-brainer. To make sure that's pretty high on the list. Obviously, for the future development for the Oxford Avenue pedestrian bridge, that would help probably ease some traffic. I do like the idea of moving up the citywide transportation plan to help with these discussions in the future. So it seems like a lower cost that could help us actually prioritize, knowing how much who's going on the roads that need to be rehabilitated, who's using it, what's the traffic like, how bad is it, what is the future development plans, et cetera, or what are the future development plans. So seeing that, as like an 11th item, that could be good in my mind. I also just see there's obviously, like I said, there's kind of two parts of this list. One that is just standard operating costs, alley maintenance, pavement maintenance, road and bridge, concrete utility, city share. And then there's the other ones, obviously, like Union Avenue Bridge, Union Avenue repaving, and East Dartmouth traffic calming, that are kind of the larger ticket, and where we want to prioritize that list itself. Obviously, I would say keeping in my mind, making sure that the streets that we have are maintained, are good, and then the future projects and would come after the maintenance tasks.
Are there any other cases Tim, where there's matching money, like anything, number 11 or anything in the list further down where there's matching money that we would be skipping out on if we didn't fund them this year?
Not at this time anyway. Yeah, everything we got match money on, we moved it up to the top there just for that very reason, knowing that we can
Yeah.
multiply our spending power with that. But at this point, we don't have anything for sure. I mean, there's certainly opportunities we can explore with some of those, but we don't have any promising leads right now. So it'd be just those two for right now are the ones we know for sure. We have another source of funding. So we kept those at the top, but the others are pretty much at this point just be city funding.
Got it. So I think, trying to synthesize some of the things that I've heard and, expressing my own preference a little bit, I would say that it sounds like folks are generally in favor of the items that are like 1 through 10 in the priority column. And then, I think the idea of moving walk and wheel up the request there, like into position number 11, maybe, that feels, and the reason I'm saying that is because it feels like we did the plan. And so there's projects that are, pretty close to ready to go or ready to go. They were prioritized in that plan. And so it feels good to not just do the plan, but then work the plan, right? Plan the work and work the plan. And then, but also I think that's a, great insight about having the citywide plan. So I would say maybe having that one at position number 12 could be a good idea, so that we're ready, so we're laying that groundwork for the next decade or so. I think the walk and wheel plan was about 10 years ago.
So the walk and wheel was updated about a year ago or 2 years ago. So there's a fairly fresh update on that we can prioritize from. And I think those are valid projects to move up there. I think those are things that, yeah, like you say, if you don't implement the plan, it gets old, and then the plan isn't the right plan anymore. You have to do a new plan. So I think it's a good opportunity to move up as much of that as we can. So I think those are very valid projects to move up the list there for consideration. And they aren't real high dollar ones either. They're the ones that we can at least get some things going on those projects, which it's always good to be able to keep moving ahead on things, not let them sit for too long.
So should we, are we looking to make a motion of recommendations?
I think, yeah, we want to have a consensus, I think, of what the committee feels are the top priorities there. So if you want to do the top 10 and add those two as 11 and 12, or if you want to move any of the other ones up higher on the list where you think, because obviously some of those, the 8, 9, 10, those are kind of borderline probably there. They may or may not be funded depending on other committees' recommendations, things like that. But if there are certain ones that you think are higher priority than those, that we want to scoot those up a little bit higher into the list just to make sure they are they past that first cut or whatever there. But it's a little difficult this year because of the way, as I was kind of putting things together and looking at what's needed there, it is tough to. A lot of these things are basically just things we need to do, and they're just we don't really have a lot of choice in maintaining our road network and stuff. We've got to be able to do that, or else we're never going to be able to do any new projects. But the Union Avenue Bridge definitely has taken more of the funding this year than we would have liked to, but that's just another example of a bridge that maybe didn't get maintained as much as it needed to over the years, and now we're having to go into it, really dig it out, start over with the whole deck, which is not cheap. So sometimes that's just the way things land there. We've got to invest in things a little bit all at once there, and it delays other things a little more. But I think after that's done, at least our bridge stuff should be in pretty good shape that we can just do because I think next year the bridge repair will definitely be moving up the list, because that'll be another year of that stuff that we know about has not been handled, and it's not getting any better. So stuff like that will be moved up the list as we're able to get other things done. But the other one to mention too is the alley paving. That's something that's always been on the list, and that's something we've kind of gone back and forth on. Do we want to start funding a little bit of alley paving? How do we want to do that? That's something eventually in the future, something we'll probably want to start thinking about, how do we want to start addressing the alleys. The V channel is holding up fairly well, but it's certainly not as strong as paving would be. And so that's something that's on there for future as well to think about. Maybe we come up with a plan to at least start chipping away at that a little bit. So yeah, if you want to move any up or down or anything, we can certainly reorder them, and then submit the list based on your top 12 or 15 or however you want to do it there. So these are our top ones we think should get funded first.
Tim, I have a question. Thank you. I have a question about the Union Avenue. So we have bridge rehabilitation on here, but there's also repaving, and those are the two most expensive items on this list, with the exception of the service center. And I'm curious though, are those interrelated in a way that if the paving doesn't get done when the bridge is done, that it would be more expensive, or like, are those interrelated at all, I guess?
Not necessarily. I certainly, if I had to prioritize, I would say the bridge is a higher priority than the road, just because the bridge is supporting the river there, and the impacts of that failing are a lot more catastrophic than just the road surface. But yeah, certainly you wouldn't have to fund them both. They're both deteriorating about the same rate because they have the same amount of traffic on them. So the truck traffic is definitely worn that road down to where it's about at the end of its useful life. So they both are needed, but they don't have to be done at the same time. But if they are both funded, we could possibly look at maybe doing the paving and the bridge repair at the same time as one project. Save a little money bidding it out all in one, kind of like we did the Dartmouth Bridge there, where we repaved all of Dartmouth and widened the bridge with one project. And I think that helped a little bit with the cost, but certainly one doesn't have to be done with the other one. They can be spread out a little bit, or if you want to recommend maybe funding the road part next year, or the year after next, and the bridge next year, something like that, we can certainly, that type of stuff is on the table as well. If you guys think that it might be more important to do something else before that paving on Union, but that's like I say, that's the staff and director kind of recommendations based on what we know. But it's certainly your prerogative to prioritize what you see as maybe a little better fit.
Okay, thank you for that. I generally agree with Chair Knaddison's sort of recommendation and his kind of review of the comments there. So from my perspective, I'd be okay moving forward with something like that if we want to do a motion. You know, if we did pull off that repaving for this cycle, we could add quite a few things from lower down on the list as well. I'm not sure what the general, community impact would be. That road on Union, of course, it gets a lot of traffic. It supports a lot of things that go on in the community, but the impact to the broader citizens and use of the community would be a lot more to pick off, 6 things lower down on the list than doing that repaving next year. So I would be comfortable if somebody wanted to, other people felt that way, to discuss further, but otherwise generally agree with the chair's comments and recap.
Yeah, I think that's a great observation. That's a project, that's a, dollars per people impacted. That project has a very, I guess, high ratio compared to the others. It's not as impactful to as many folks in the city. Member Lewis?
I have a
Yes,
quick question, and you may have mentioned it, but the bridge repairs, is that directly the bridge on Broadway and Hamden?
No, that's actually for all of the other bridges in the city. The
Okay.
bridge at Broadway and Hamden is actually owned by CDOT. That's not even on our network there. So
Yeah, I was wondering where that was listed, because that's a major project. Okay.
yeah, that one is, we don't have that on here right now. And that's certainly one that I think it is actually on here as a tier 2 somewhere, but it's certainly an option to, I think that one's about 7 million short, but I mean, that would consume up all of our budget. So there's a consideration there that wouldn't let us do much of anything else if we tried to fill that gap right now. So it's on there. It's certainly a need, but it's got to prioritize it, like you said, with all the needs of the rest of the city as well.
Yeah, and I understand it's part of CDOT's budget, but I wonder in the future if Englewood's budget would parlay or be affected based on that major project? Or not affected, but, you know, piggyback off that project?
Yeah, so at this point, the city has committed quite a bit to that project already. So the feeling is that CDOT really needs to contribute a little bit more because it's more of a regional type of benefit on that project there. It's not just Englewood residents. Now 285 really carries traffic through Englewood, places far west and east as well. So the thought is that the city's put in quite a lot already to fund that, and then maybe it's not the best thing to keep putting more city money into it rather than trying to get more of a regional contribution to make that happen.
That makes sense.
Tim, I did have a question. So thinking about what Member Dietrich said about possibly postponing the Union Avenue repaving, I know, is that a viable option? I know you guys are on that road, looking at that road, examining all the features of it, more than I will ever know, and more than I'm aware of doing or capable of doing. Pushing that off to 2025. So, you know, we took 1.8 this year for the bridge and then 1.5 next year for the road, and then finding, you know, 5 or more items in the list below to knock off some smaller things. Is that a viable option, or based on the road condition, based on who's using the road, it's not really viable and we need to kind of keep it at number 3?
So I guess my thought on that would be if you go ahead and do the bridge and you don't do the road at the same time, the public perception of that is not going to turn out too well, because I know we get a ton of calls about Union Avenue and the condition, and we're out there patching it as much as we can. It just, Union Avenue is deteriorating pretty quickly there, just as much as that bridge is. So I think if you did one without the other, I think people would wonder why you didn't fix everything at once. And that it is kind of the thought of paving the road and doing the bridge at the same time, I think kind of ties all that together to where people see that we addressed the entire problem and just didn't do the bridge part. We actually did the road too, because it is even now, I think a lot of people get frustrated that we can't just go out there and rebuild that road. We just don't have enough funding to rebuild the entire road. So it's the public perception of that could be problematic. I think if we don't do it all at once, I think we get a lot of pushback from why are we not fixing the road as well? Why are we just doing the bridge? So that's, like I say, it's all kind of deteriorating at the same time, at the same rate, and it's it all needs to be redone. And it's becoming very apparent to the public. I think that road is just kind of like Dartmouth is. You know, Dartmouth is beat up, and we needed to do the whole thing. And so it's similar situation with Union there. The thought is we just go all the way from Santa Fe to the bridge and get the whole thing done and get it out of our hair and have it last for another good 20, 30 years. Not have to keep pothole patching and trying to limp it along, because it's just not it's not going to hold up much longer. And the longer we wait, the more we do have issues within potential problems that as it deteriorates, it's unpredictable what's going to happen. We don't want to be reactive on stuff like that. It's better to try to be proactive and then address it before it becomes a major failure in the road or something.
Awesome. No, that's a great answer and definitely a great context. So I do really appreciate that. I guess, are there other, so these are, this is almost half of the budget this year, or is it directly half? It's directly half of the 6.6 at 3.3 for Union Avenue. Are there other roads or projects that would, going into 2025, that would be similar, or is this kind of like, okay, we got rid of or we took care of Dartmouth, had that big funding, we took care of now Union Ave, and now we can start picking up a lot of these smaller ones and taking more of this impactful, like full city approach?
Yeah, correct. That is the thinking. I think if we get Union Avenue knocked out, because we do have funding for paving Broadway now. Broadway's our next pavement priority there. We do have funding to pave. We should be able to pave all of Broadway from north end of the city to the south end of the city. That's already been allocated in our roadway maintenance budget, and the new sales tax that we got that really kicks that into gear, that we can actually really make some headway. And so Broadway is the only other street that really is in that similar situation where we need to do something sooner or later because it's really falling apart on us. But that one's already funded. So I think once Union is done, we really don't have any major, arterial or collector type streets that need to be rebuilt. And you're right, we could in 25 start doing some of these smaller things that impact a larger part of the population. But these streets here are just ones that have just kind of outlived their useful life and they need to be redone before they turn into even more expensive repair.
Wonderful, thank you. I'll ask another question. Why not? For alley paving, it's allocated at 500,000. Is that for the consulting of the alley paving? Or
No,
is that actually tackling a couple alleys?
That would be actually built them. Yeah, we don't need a whole lot of design on those. We probably do the design with our existing engineering staff in-house and be able to put the plans together on that. So that would be, hopefully that would be enough to do about 3 alleys. Is 500,000 is kind of based on the pricing we've seen in the past. 500 would probably cover 3 alleys worth if we wanted to do that. That's the kind of where that number comes from.
And when you say 3 alleys, is that 3 blocks of an alley, or is that like
3 blocks. Yeah, each
Okay.
block's about 600 feet long, and that'd be 3 600 feet stretches of alley. So that's the 1,800 feet of alley would cover that.
okay? And then with that, I would vote to lower the priority of that, as far as looking at it being number 12 when we could do walk and wheel implementation or a citywide transportation plan. It seems like 3 blocks versus the alley maintenance costs versus everything. It seems like an expensive project to tackle.
Yeah, it definitely is. That's a multi-million-dollar project to at some point figure out. But you're right. That money doesn't go very far on that one.
Yeah, agreed with that. And I think, it's just thinking about these in terms of the number of people, again, like dollars per number of people that are impacted by that, alley feels like a very low usage area, very specific set of people who would benefit from it. So that definitely feels like something that we should move down in priority to me.
Sorry, number 67, where it says arterial and collector street sidewalk widening 6 feet where necessary. Do we know the amount of sidewalks or places where that would need to be widened at this time? Or how many that is, or is that just as it comes up?
Yeah, we don't have a good inventory of that just yet. That is, we do know there are several like that though, where you've got a busier street like that and a narrow sidewalk, which is not comfortable for anybody to walk on a narrow sidewalk next to 45-mile-an-hour traffic. So it's to start picking off some of those, but we don't have a good inventory of that. And that's a good point. We should probably get that inventory. So it's understood kind of what the magnitude of that is and how long it would take to fund that if we wanted to start chipping away at that as well. So that's something we can certainly follow up on. I think that's a good thing to have in there. So it's just like the sidewalk gap, we do have a quantity now, so it's understood, if you want to fund this much per year, it's going to take this many years to fill every sidewalk gap in the city. So we can do that on that one as well. That's something I can get somebody started on that just to know how much of that there is and how much it would take to do everything in the city.
anybody have some language for a motion that they'd like to propose? I'm happy to go ahead and do it. You know, if with a pause without anybody volunteering, I will. You know, I believe that that's allowed, although not recommended for the chair to do. But I'm happy to do it if we have a pause where folks are feeling reluctant. So trying to again synthesize what I've heard. I would say endorsing the top that make a motion to endorse the top 10 items presented today, move the walk and wheel implementation request to number 11, move the citywide transportation plan to number 12, and move alley paving off of the prioritized list.
I'll second that motion.
Okay, thank you, Member Diedrich. Any discussion? And it's also acceptable to propose amendments.
I think I would like to amend to raise Oxford Avenue pedestrian bridge match up in the priority list, as the money is not guaranteed in forward years and is a possible community help and a community link from the south side of Oxford to the north end. There's actually the benefits of like the rec center being there, the light rail, etc. So I would like to move that up, would be the amendment.
To any specific position?
I would opt for no. I don't have a specific position exactly. I would probably say number 4 if I was going to opt for it.
Okay, that sounds good to me, and I think that as the person who motioned, that I can accept the amendment.
I'm good with that.
Yeah, me too. Seems reasonable.
Alrighty. Any other discussion or amendments? Okay, then we can move to a vote.
Chair Knaddison,
Aye.
Member Lewis,
Aye.
Member Diedrich,
Aye.
Member Whitney.
Aye.
Okay, motion carries.
Excellent, thank you. Well, is this, I know that there were a couple different things, items for us to discuss tonight. Does it feel like we've fulfilled the goals that we had? And I'm sort of addressing that question to you, Deputy Director Hughes and Mayor Sierra.
Yeah, I think it's all good on my side. Thank you for that.
Yeah, sure.
We got some good feedback. We can have Michelle share it with the finance department there, so it can be incorporated into the package that city council does to consider the final prioritization and what gets funded there. So I think this is good feedback, and I think it definitely is worthwhile projects there. These are all of them can be argued as worthwhile, but there's certain budget limitations. You've got to make choices. I think it's a good compromise here.
Yeah, I think this is one of the hardest things to do and also one of the most important. So thanks everybody for the prep work and for sharing your opinions and thoughts tonight. So next on the list, next on our agenda is Director's Choice. And I guess Deputy Director Hoos, if you have anything to add in that slot.
Sure, I can share a couple of recent bids we got for street maintenance work. We actually got a really good bid this year on our mill and overlay project there. It was about 900,000 less than last year than what we expected. So we're able to do, gonna be able to add some more streets this year, which is really good news. We'll be able to do a little bit more than we thought. So that was good to see those bids. But once a bid came in lower than we expected, then the price didn't go up. The bridge stuff's always going up, but the mill and overlay this year definitely came in very competitive. So we're happy to see that. And then we've also recently got bids on our concrete utility project for this year, and those bids are pretty much level with last year. We didn't see a huge increase, so it was good to see that we're still able to get similar amount of work done this year. So those are two recent bids we got that are very good news. So we're happy to see that, and we're able to get everything done. And the paving we'll be able to do a little bit more this year than we anticipated. So that was really good to see. So I think I shared on that project last time. We're going to do a good chunk of Broadway there from the Ale down to Dartmouth. Then we're going to do south of Bellevue there, finish all the way to the southern boundary of the city there up against Littleton. And then we're also going to do Dartmouth west of the Dartmouth Bridge there and go all the way to Zunite at the border of the city. So that's nice. We'll have Dartmouth repaved all the way west of Santa Fe to the city boundary. So that's going to be nice to have that. And that's also the one where we're installing the bike lane on Dartmouth there. We'll have the bike lane all the way from the Platte River Trail there to Zunite. It'll be a nice connection there with the path we just put in or work with Denver on going north. So anyway, yeah, that's some recent good bids we got. So some good news that we're able to get a lot of good work done. But I think that's all I have for now anyway.
Great, thank you. Alrighty, so next thing on the agenda is chairperson's choice, and I have no additional items I was hoping to talk about tonight. And so maybe we'll go to committee members' choice, and we can start with Member Lewis.
I don't have anything further. No, thanks though.
Okay, great. Member Deidre?
Yeah, I would. There's been some study on the corridor. We had talked kind of recently about Old Inglewood, or sorry, connections between Old Inglewood and so the plan. There was a public meeting after they had an opportunity to join and provide some input on a plan that's happening in the city center area with some transportation as part of that broader development in the area. I attended a meeting with the consultants. I think it was OV. One person done a lot of the other consulting for projects, and I thought they did a good job pulling that some of the other projects together. There was a community meeting that followed the committee meeting, and I believe there was another committee member that joined. I think it was from Parks and Rec, maybe. But it was very interesting to see what they were kind of talking about, making that corridor between basically Broadway and the light rail station as far as like transportation is concerned. And they had some short-term wins that looked pretty interesting, as well as some longer-term potential improvements. I was glad I showed up. There wasn't a whole lot of participation, but there was a public meeting. So first, I want to let you guys know, it sounded like a lot of things we talked about on here and some of those plans and things kind of made it into the discussion there, which is really nice to see that some of those things were incorporated for multimodal through that corridor, as well as things like separating like very wide areas for that road. The right of way is big there, so wide sidewalks. We can have separated bike lanes. So it was pretty interesting to see that. It was still. I'm a little concerned. It was still very vehicle centric through there. There's so many parking lots and things that, in my opinion, kind of what we talked about is that area could have more of like a promenade feel rather than this like thoroughfare between the light rail and Broadway. So I tried to emphasize some of that through there. Are there ways we can move traffic around or have that be more of a pedestrian zone because of the densities that they're talking about? So I don't know if anybody was able to make the public meeting on that. I think there might be more coming around. And I know you're definitely a part of that. I'm not sure if anybody else on here was, but I would love to kind of see where that went following that public meeting and kind of we'll have any other opportunities for inputs on that. So I don't know if anybody on here has any info on that, but I wanted to say that it was nice to be able to provide input and see that they were listening and was kind of curious next step.
So that project's being run by the planning division there. Our long-range planner is involved in that. I have not heard on the follow-up to the public meeting yet, the feedback and what they plan to do or what any changes they're looking at. I'm familiar a little bit with what they're proposing, but I can definitely follow up and see what the next steps would be and make sure that the feedback is how it's been incorporated in it, so you can know what they've done and what changes might be made because of. I'm sure there'll be some changes because of the public hearing. There's always the public meeting. There's always things that are brought up there that are sometimes not thought about. That's good to include. But yeah, it's certainly something we can for the next meeting. Whatever, I can give you an update on that one if you go.
Yeah, that would be much appreciated. So just for the group here, they talked about connection to some of the trails, like the one that dead ends at Broadway and Hampton there. What is that, Little Dry Creek? Is that right? And so kind of figuring out what's the right way to connect that over to South Platte was a nice thing that they had there. Talked about the roundabout a lot, just the size of it, things like that too, which is kind of interesting. But anyways, we'll see where that kind of goes from here. But keep my ears listening for updates on that. Thanks, Tim.
I can ask them to give us. I can ask them to come to the next meeting, give us an update on where they're at. Because I know there's definitely they've gotten our feedback, and then they've got public feedback. I'm sure there's some other plans formulated now, but I can ask them to maybe come to the next meeting and kind of give us an update on where they're at and what might be happening on that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that would be good because like I said, some of the stuff we talked about, that trail access between light rail and Old Town and Floyd was kind of on the periphery, and I think they hadn't talked too much about it, but I know we talked quite a bit with this committee about upgrades to Floyd and kind of changing that between Broadway and the light rail station as well. And there was an interesting comment too about Cushing Park over there, the connection from city center and some of the other areas. It's literally walled off. And I get that, there's like a Walmart with big trucks next to the houses over there and things, but if you were to get off the light rail and walk over, east to Broadway, you would never even know there's a park 2 blocks down the street because there's a giant wall there. So that was kind of another thing that kind of came up in that meeting. Anyways, no other topics. I appreciate if we can hear more as that progresses. Thanks, Tim.
Yeah, thank you for attending that, Chris, and thanks for the update. And that seems great to have those consultants present to us, like let us know the plans. If there's like a particularly good moment where there's been some progress and where they're open for input or where our input would be useful, that would be great. Alrighty, Member Whitney?
Nothing on my plate, so thank you.
Okay, great. Well, Mayor Sierra, anything from you?
No, nothing for me. Thanks, everyone.
Okay, great. Well, I think that's a meeting. So thanks everybody for your time tonight, and we got done right at 7:14. So if anybody has anything at 7:15, they're all set.
Have a good night, everyone.
Thanks very much.
Thanks,
Thanks,
everybody.
guys. Enjoy.
Good seeing everybody. Have a good night.
Too.